Ukraine claims to have freed 3 villages in the Donetsk region as its counter-offensive officially gets underway.
Evacuation efforts continue in Ukraine's flooded Kherson region, but Kyiv says Moscow is bombing rescue boats.
Novak Djokovic wins a record 23rd Grand Slam title by beating Casper Ruud in the French Open final.
Ukrainian forces claim to have retaken 3 frontline villages in the southeast of the country. The first was Blahodatne in the Donetsk region. But more footage has been released on social media, seemingly showing Ukrainian troops celebrating in the neighbouring settlement of Nekushne. The gains are the first since the start of Ukraine's counter-offensive as Russia continues its shelling campaign. A suburb of Kharkiv has been hit by cluster bombs. The weekend also saw a simultaneous prisoner swap by Russia and Ukraine. Nearly 100 prisoners each were exchanged. The Ukrainian prisoners included members of the National Guard and Border Guards who had been in action in several places, including near the city of Mariupol and the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, Moscow says its forces fought off a mass attack by Ukrainian high-speed marine drones on a Russian naval ship in the Black Sea. The Ministry of Defense said the vessel was protecting natural gas pipelines. It had been monitoring the situation along the Turk Stream and Blue Stream pipelines.
Ukraine's Kherson region continues to struggle with the consequences of flooding after the Kakhovka Dam burst last week. Rescuers and volunteers are still working to evacuate those who remain in the remote areas, despite the risk of Russian shelling. 3 people were killed and 10 wounded in what Kyiv claims were Russian forces hitting a boat carrying evacuees from flooded occupied territory to Ukrainian-controlled areas. In his nightly address, Ukraine's President Zelensky accused Moscow of blowing up the dam, abandoning people in flooded towns and villages, and of shelling evacuating boats. Although many people still need evacuating, the water level upstream from the destroyed dam has fallen significantly, but what's left is becoming increasingly polluted, raising fears over health and sanitation. Experts are concerned that locals could soon fall foul to infectious diseases which can spread quickly. Tens of thousands have lost access to drinking water.
19,500. That's the approximate number of children Ukraine says Russia has forcibly deported or abducted since the start of its full-scale invasion. Officials suspect thousands have been sent to re-education camps where they receive military training and new identities before being adopted by Russian families. A number of humanitarian organisations are working hard to bring missing children home. So far, the NGO Save Ukraine has helped rescue 118 missing youths.
So we provide just all legal work, psychological help if they need to, and all the financial help. We think through the route and make some preparations with our people, with our partners.
Kyiv has also opened centres tasked with returning children to Ukraine. But for the lucky few who make it back, it is just the beginning. The UN estimates that 3.5 million children in Ukraine have severe to catastrophic levels of needs, while 75% of parents say their children are experiencing psychological trauma.
This is one of the situations that's very sensitive also for families. Sometimes after they get the children, they don't even want to talk about it because they worry that something else might come after. But what we focus on is what we call reintegration, which is trying to see where the children have been, what have they gone through, and how can we make that simply go away.
To cope with the effects of war, Save the Children and UNICEF provide physical and mental health support, remote and digital classes for children, financial advice, parental advice and other essential services.
One of the most important things, though, as far as UNICEF's concerned, is to ensure that wherever children may be, no matter what the set of circumstances is, children do have an opportunity to access learning. Whether it be in a formal school setting or whether it be online.
Rance warns that schools and resources will not be repaired overnight.
So recovery and rebuilding is not just about infrastructure, it's also about rebuilding the community and society here in Ukraine to be that which actually is child-centric and child-focused, puts children and their needs at the center, and that requires, of course, significant resources to do that.
The atrocities in the Kyiv suburb of Bucha have become synonymous with Russia's alleged war crimes in Ukraine. The EU and the US want to hold Russian leaders legally accountable for the international crime of aggression in Ukraine, but prosecution is proving difficult.
Well, in terms of the crime of aggression, unfortunately, the International Criminal Court does not have jurisdiction over the Ukraine-Russia situation. Russia is not a signatory to the court. Ukraine has filed declarations, but is not a signatory to the Rome Statute. And so that means the International Criminal Court does not have jurisdiction to try aggression.
Away from The Hague, the European Commission is considering two options for prosecuting the crime of aggression: an international and independent ad hoc tribunal, or a hybrid special court based on the Ukrainian judicial system but staffed by international judges.
You have a political difficulty, which is getting enough states within the General Assembly at this point to agree on such a tribunal, on such an agreement. So it's a political problem, and there are some struggles ahead.
And that further complicates the legal situation, but there are prominent examples of international special tribunals throughout history. For example, against the former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, and the Nuremberg trials against leading figures in the Nazi Party after World War II.
I mean, Milosevic never thought he'd be in front of a court, but Hermann Göring in 1942 never thought he'd be in front of a court. 3 years later, he and the architects of the final solution are sitting in front of an international court. So, we don't deal in fantasies, but there is precedent for the likes of Putin ending up their days in legal battles and court proceedings.
EC President Ursula von der Leyen has led a European delegation to Tunisia, hoping to persuade President Kais Saied to impose tighter controls on migration to Europe in return for economic aid. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte were in the team sent to Tunisia. The EU says it's willing to offer 900 million euros in economic aid as part of a 5-point programme that includes support halting illegal immigration. Tunisia is just 150 kilometres from the Italian island of Lampedusa and has become a favoured departure point for those seeking to travel to Europe. But President Saied has said he is unwilling for Tunisia to act as the continent's border guard. Air traffic is booming again, a trend that seems to run counter to goals of reducing greenhouse gases. The sector is responsible for between 3 and 6% of carbon dioxide emissions. This year, the International Air Transport Association is forecasting 4.35 billion passengers, close to the record levels seen before the COVID pandemic, which grounded aircraft. In 20 years, passenger numbers have doubled. NGOs and environmental associations advocate increased investment in railways, the introduction of flight quotas per passenger and higher taxation, in particular to discourage the most active travellers.
L'idée, c'est que plus vous prenez l'avion, plus la taxe sera élevée, ce qui permettrait de faire peser l'effort sur les personnes qui prennent le plus l'avion et pas sur une personne qui irait voir sa famille dans les Antilles tous les 3 ans, par exemple. Il y a des personnes qui prennent extrêmement souvent l'avion. Je vous donne un chiffre. En France, si vous êtes un cadre supérieur, vous allez prendre l'avion 17 fois plus que si vous êtes un ouvrier. Donc oui, il y a une inégalité dans l'usage de l'avion.
Aware of its carbon footprint, the air transport sector has begun its transition to a low-carbon economy, but the road ahead is a long one. The main levers include optimising engine performance, better traffic management, using fuel from non-fossil sources such as biomass, algae and agricultural or food waste, and in the long term by 2035 to 2040, electric or hydrogen-powered aircraft.
En combinant ces quatre leviers, on arrivera à horizon 2050 à une quasi-neutralité carbone, croisons les doigts, pour l'industrie aéronautique et les compagnies aériennes. Il restera toujours une partie d'émissions qu'on va qualifier de marginales, qu'il faudra certainement arriver à effacer, si je puis dire, grâce à des technologies qu'on appelle direct air capture, qui consistent grosso modo à aller chercher le carbone directement dans l'air avec d'énormes séchoirs à cheveux, si vous voulez une image qui marque un peu tout le monde, pour venir extraire ce carbone et pourquoi pas le recycler en carburant pour l'industrie aéronautique au final.
While climate advocates applaud the efforts of the air transport industry to decarbonise, they point out that this technological revolution is taking too long to address the climate emergency. Novak Djokovic has won a record 23rd Grand Slam title by beating Casper Ruud in the French Open final. Djokovic's 7-6, 6-3, 7-5 victory over the Norwegian was convincing. The 36-year-old Serb now moves ahead of the injured Rafael Nadal as the all-time #1 in terms of Grand Slam victories. He also regains the top spot in the current international standings.